and it's my great pleasure to welcome a bishop to our church this morning. Yeah, we've got some woos. Okay, this is the new Bishop of Stockport, by the way. Brand new, not quite, are you? The Bishop of Stockport, Bishop Sam. Will you give him a warm welcome, please?
You said they were quite scary. They're not that scary.
They're not as scary, are they? No. They're quite friendly, aren't they? How's it been? What's life been like since you've come into the Diocese of Chester and Bishop of Stockport?
So about 3 or 4 years ago, I had a sense, because the bishop thing has been around for a while, that the Bishop of Stockport would be the role that would kind of work for me, in the mix of rural and urban and places where there's huge opportunity and places where there's huge struggle. So that was like the benchmark. And then Bishop Libby announced that she was going to Derby, and I was like, you rat, that's too soon. And then it was announced that they weren't going to appoint a bishop. So I was like, well, that might work out. And then it was announced that Bishop Mark was appointed the Bishop of Chester. And I was like, well, that would be too good to be true. It's never going to happen. And then, you know, sometimes with discernment, as you work out what the Lord's calling you to do, it's quite complicated and tricky, isn't it? And other times, it's just like there's something behind you. And it was one of those occasions where there was something behind me, really. And so I still scream every time I walk past a mirror and see myself in purple.
I think it suits you, don't you think?
It matches my eyes, doesn't it? But I love just getting out and about. I was not a very good vicar, to be honest, as my parishes will tell you. But mixing around and about in different locations, dropping into different places, causing chaos. I mean, blessing people in the name of all of that kind of stuff. Eating cake, it just suits me, and it's a real privilege. So I'm still learning what it is to be a bishop, so email me afterwards and tell me what I did wrong. But it's just great to be around people and great to be with you today.
And do you work out? Just all the cake you eat, you know, do you work out? You
know?
No. No?
I'm built for comfort.
You're built for comfort, okay.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here. It's really great to welcome you to All Saints. And we're gonna have our gospel reading now, aren't we? So I'm just looking at, is there a reader scheduled today? Great, okay.
Great, I'll do it.
You're going to do it, aren't you?
I can think of a sermon as I read it.
Good. Can you? Great,
yeah,
okay.
Great. So we're going to look at Luke chapter 24, if that's okay. It's tough if it's not. It's a rhetorical question. So, great. The disciples on the road to Emmaus. You'll be familiar with this story, probably. It's on the same day as Jesus was raised to life. So now on that same day, 2 of the disciples were going to a village called Emmaus. Just by the way, we don't really know where that is, so it could be anywhere, somewhere. It's a bit like the book of Jonah, where he's supposed to be going to Nineveh, but goes to Tarshish. It's a place of nothingness. So wherever this village was, that's where they were going. It was about 7 miles from Jerusalem. And talking with each other about all these things that had happened. While they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself came near and went with them. But the eyes of the disciples were kept from recognizing him. And Jesus said to them, "What are you discussing with each other while you walk along?" They stood still, looking sad. Then one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have taken place there in these days?" Jesus asked them, "What things?" I love that. What things? My crucifixion and resurrection? What things? They replied, "The things about Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be condemned to death and crucified him. We'd hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it is now the 3rd day since these things took place. And moreover, some women of our group astounded us. They were at the tomb early this morning, and when they did not find his body there, they came back and told us that they had indeed seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. And some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said," brackets, because we didn't believe the women, obviously. "But they did not see him." Then he said to them, Jesus said to those disciples, "Oh, how foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have declared. Was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer these things and then enter into his glory?" And then beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them the things about himself in all the scriptures. Some Bible study, some Alpha Course session that was. And as they came near to the village to which they were going, Jesus walked ahead as if he were going on. But the disciples urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, because it is almost evening and the day is now nearly over." So Jesus went in to stay with them. And when he was at the table with them, he took bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. The disciples said to each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he was talking to us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us?" Let us pray. Jesus, just as you opened the scriptures to those disciples and their hearts burned within them, so would you do the same this morning. Open the scriptures, talk to us, and set our hearts on fire anew to your praise and glory. Amen. Now, I'm here today to tell you there's a mistake in that reading. I'm really sorry if you've not been told about this before, but it is quite significant that at the start of this talk, I need to point out the mistake. Did any of you spot it? No? It was there in the first few words. It's not actually in the words of Scripture, just in case you're about to burn me at the stake. It's there in the description. In my Bible, it says, the disciples on the road to Emmaus. We often get the focus of our attention wrong. As if this passage is about two disciples walking along a road and not actually about Jesus, who's just been crucified and raised to life and appears with them and sets their hearts on fire. It's a bit, and this happens quite a lot in Luke's gospel, actually. Do you remember earlier in chapter 15, Jesus is warming up the crowd and tells a couple of parables. There's this sheep that's gone missing, and 99 sheep are left behind, but Fluffy has gone astray. And so the shepherd goes after Fluffy, finds Fluffy, brings him home, and then has a party. Don't think about what a shepherd uses to have a party, because that's not good news for Fluffy. But anyway, Fluffy is found, and we call that parable the parable of the lost sheep. Ridiculous. Why is that parable about Fluffy and not about the shepherd that goes searching? And then the next parable afterwards, as Jesus continues to warm up the crowd, is about someone who owns a house and they've got a little bit of money, not a lot, and they're counting out their coins and they realize that one is lost. And so they search the house, all under the kids' toys and under the grandchildren's toys and under the rug and everything else. And eventually they find the coin and they're so excited that they throw a party which costs much more than the coin, all a bit weird. And that's known as the parable of the, which is ridiculous. Because it's actually about the widow who searches. And then, having warmed up the crowd, Jesus goes in for the kill, and he tells the story of two brothers, one who's a miserable old git and stays at home, and the other who's quite fun and embraces life, and basically says to his mum and dad, "I wish you were dead because I'd like the money," and his dad gives him a load of money, and he goes and spends it on all kinds of things that kids in the room are not going to go there. And then when all the money's gone, back to the bank of mum and dad, "Could I come back?" And dad runs to meet him, embraces him, gives him a new robe, a ring on his finger, kills the fatted calf, and welcomes him in, which really annoys the older brother. And we call that the parable of the... ridiculous. Because it's actually about the father who watches, who waits, who runs, who embraces, who restores, who makes all things new. It makes a difference where we put the focus. Is it on us? Or is it actually on the one who meets us on the road, the one who embraces, the one who makes all things new? It sounds like a little difference, but it actually makes a big difference in terms of how we view our lives, how we view reality. Is it just down to us and what we do, or is it actually about God? In a minute, we're going to hear some testimonies, and it will be wonderful to hear these stories of all that the Lord has done in people's lives. It's not about what they've done, it's about what God has done in taking all that these wonderful people have done, even the stuff that's not great, and somehow gathering it together and stitching it into God's story. I found Jesus. No, you haven't, you muppet. Jesus has found you. That's the wonderful story, that wherever we are, Jesus comes and finds us. And I love this about the resurrected Jesus. If I'd just been raised from the dead, the first place I would go would be to have a conversation with Pilate. Back to truth, mate. Or I'd go to Caiaphas. Let's have a conversation about high priesthood, shall we? Or I'd go to Herod and say, who's laughing now? Which is why I'm not the Messiah and not the risen Jesus. Jesus stays in a garden and goes for Mary, the one perhaps above all, whose very existence and sense of self is held together by this Jesus, who she's lost and doesn't know what's happening. Jesus goes to her first. And then he goes to the disciples, even though they're a bunch of no-hopers, and they're locked away for fear. He just appears and says, peace be with you. Terrifies them, scares the life out of them. And Thomas isn't there, and he gets a bit stroppy, saying, why have I missed out? And I won't believe unless I see the marks in his hands and the wound in his side. Knowing something about how pain and suffering and the reality of human experience needs to be incorporated in this risen Jesus. We call him the doubter. Actually, he sees and understands more than anyone else. And Jesus appears to him one-on-one. And then Jesus appears to Peter and restores him. Doesn't just say, well, we wanted you to be the vicar, but that didn't work out, so you just make the cups of tea. See if you can get that right. Yeah, tea in that one, coffee. No, it doesn't do that. You're always called to be the one on whom I'll build my church. And because you failed, because you've got it wrong, you are the one who will do those things. Because you're learning, Peter. It's not about you. It's about me and my spirit, which will be within you. And then these two people, we only know the name of one of them. The other one must be a bit gutted for all of eternity. How come they got their name in the Bible and I didn't? Anyway, you can ask them later when you meet them. But Jesus goes after them. There are loads of other things that he could do, but he wanders down the road and meets these people. And doesn't just do it in an instant. Doesn't just whistle and say, come back this way and spend a bit more time in Jerusalem. But draws alongside them and actually asks them a question. If you read the resurrection appearances, you'll see that Jesus does that quite a lot. Mary, why are you weeping? Mary, who are you looking for? And here, what are you talking about? He doesn't just come and tell us. He draws alongside us and asks us questions which unlock everything that we're thinking about, everything that we're worried about. He's the key, really, to everything, isn't he? The key to who we are, to who we want to be, to how we make sense of all of the things that we've done. And he draws alongside us and in the most beautiful way asks us questions which somehow gather together all that we are, all that we've done, all that we long for, and bring it all together so that we can meet with him and so that he can do business with us. It's a beautiful way in which Jesus works, a patient way, a gentle, kind, and beautiful way. And then he goes as if to go on, because this one is always about what's to come, always about the future. In fact, he's the one who comes from the future to us in order to draw us into his future. So he goes as if to go on, and they say, no, please will you come and stay with us, which is a really significant idea of staying with God, of remaining with him, of abiding with him, just as he stays and remains and abides with us, if only we'll let him through his Spirit. And so he comes in, and it's as he tells the story by breaking bread and sharing it with those disciples, that's when they get it. That's when they see how their stories are interwoven into his story. And then what happens? He disappears, because you can't hold on to him. He's not your possession, something you own or you control. He's going ahead, as he always does. And our invitation is to seek after him and to follow him and to go with him wherever he goes. I've wanted to be a vicar since I was about 4 years old, because I fell in love with the vicar's daughter at the time. When I was 22, I'd kind of been wrestling with faith, and I'd gone a long way from the kind of life that I knew God was calling me to. And outwardly, everything was going well. A couple of degrees, I was training to be a teacher. Life looked good, but inside I knew that it had gone wrong, and a relationship fell apart. And as I'm driving home on the 19th of February, 1999, age 22, that's for those of you who like maths or logical puzzles, I'm driving back to my mum and dad saying, I'm about to ask if I can move back in with them, feeling like a failure, like, yeah, mum and dad always knew and all of that, because that's what mum and dads do, isn't it? And as I'm driving back, God speaks to me with a question, because that's how he often works. Again, I ask you, Sam, your way or my way? And I simply said, this time, Lord, your way. And it was like the whole road opened up, and there was light, and there was peace, and there was goodness. Because God comes to find us wherever we are, to ask questions which unlock the very deepest hopes and desires and joys, and attends to our deepest fears and hurts and pains, and somehow makes sense of it all and enables us to move forwards, not by ourselves, not as orphans, but in the presence, in the company, in the light, in the love, in the joy of the one who has come to find us, to ask us those questions, and who bids us forward. So I wonder what question the Lord is asking you today. I wonder where you are on the road. And I also wonder, for those for whom you pray, what question the Lord might be asking them today. Never give up on the Lord and how he might be at work in their lives. The road is long, life is long, but Jesus is always prepared to go the distance. So don't lose hope. Continue to pray for them, that they might be open to the one who comes alongside them, asking them questions and leading them forwards. So as we think of them, as we offer ourselves anew to God, and as we rejoice with these candidates who have met with Jesus on the road, so may we be open anew to who God is, to his work in our lives, to the questions he asks us, and to the privilege and opportunity of being his friends, of being known by him, and of walking with him.